Welcome, everyone, to this continuing study of the Gospel according to John. We're returning now here on Monday morning after a 2 or 3 week break because of the Easter season. And so we're back again. Now, we'll probably have 1 or 2 more classes. We will be beginning today the arrest of Jesus and the crucifixion. And so now let us pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We praise you, O Lord, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Lord Jesus Christ, in your cross you have given us new life. In our reflection and study today, help us to appreciate the life you give us. In Christ our Lord, amen. Very good. Now, the approach that I'm going to be taking for the rest of this presentation is not going to be as I've done before. It's going to be a bit different. Instead of going through this almost line by line and doing text analysis, we're going to be looking at what I would call an overview in order to grasp some rather essential realities. The Gospel of John, you will discover, is going to be significantly different in how it presents this scene. We've already noticed that we had 5 chapters in the upper room alone, the focus that is there. And so we're going to be looking at a definite focus that John wants to present for us in terms of what will be happening. Now, I'm going to go over here. Let me get my pointer. Jay, get us up to the screen, please. All right, now let's see where we're going. So pointed out up here, remember, the present walls of Jerusalem are here now. This goes back to the mid-1500s, Suleiman the Magnificent. At the time of Jesus, the walls of Jerusalem extended south, coming around here, and going down. This is the old city of David here. Original Jerusalem is here. All right. Now, one of the few things left in Jerusalem from the time of Jesus as a structure is going to be, says, the lower cases of the walls of the Temple Mount, and also there is near the palace of Caiaphas a stone staircase. It's right next to the church of so-called St. Peter in Gallicantu. The word Gallicantu in Latin means the cock crows. And the church is built over the area of the palace of Caiaphas, which would be located about here. Got a wonderful view of the Temple Mount from there. So where the Last Supper took place and the residence of Caiaphas aren't that far apart, really. So they would have had to go down here through the gate, cross the Kidron Valley, and the journey is going to take them here. Now you'll notice, I think you see on the screen, all this green. These are all olive trees. This has been an olive garden for, 2.5 centuries? Or more, really. And this is the church here. This is where you have the church of the agony in the garden. It's popularly known as the Church of All Nations because about 12 different, each dome was decorated by a different country, and there's other mosaics around, inside of it that were donated by different nations. And over here is the area that is called Gethsemane. Gethsemane means actually the olive press. This is all an olive area, plantation. And so this cave where Jesus would stay in with the apostles and his disciples was where the olive press was located. Now, we're going to go from there, so this is where they would stay overnight. Now what's happened is that Judas Iscariot knows where they stay. You will also notice, not only in the Gospel of John, but the other Gospels, is that they wanted to arrest Jesus, but they couldn't do it. Why? Because of the crowds of people. How many times did you see in the Gospel of John, they wanted to arrest him, but they couldn't do it because there's so many people and they considered him as a prophet. So when Jesus is on the Temple Mount, or even in the confines of Jerusalem itself, trying to arrest Jesus would have caused a major public disturbance. And remember, who's doing the arresting? It's not the Romans. It would be the temple guard. Now this is going to be interesting. Remember I told you the difference between priests and Levites? That's the term that you would see in the Gospels. They're all of the tribe of Levi, but what's the difference? And remember my lecture about Zadokites? Like John the Baptist's father, Zachariah, John the Baptist. These are the priests who get to serve inside the temple building. Well, what do the Levites do? They're all priests too, but they don't get to serve inside the temple like the others. These are the ones, actually, this goes back, you can see this in Nehemiah. The Levites are catechists. The Levites are also the musicians for worship at the Temple Mount. The Levites are also the ushers, the money changers, as well as the temple guards. Now, I'm sure there are some guards that are probably not Levites who are hired out as security force, but that is the team that comes out to arrest Jesus. And so most of the people that are coming out to get Jesus are Levites. And it has to be at night. It's far away from everybody, correct? And so this way they can arrest Jesus without causing a major public disturbance, especially at Passover, because Jerusalem would be packed with people, especially people encamping around Jerusalem. Sort of like in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2. Remember, it took 2 days for them searching the tents of their relatives, because this is the one of the most important pilgrimage holy times. Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And so, and again, bear in mind, these northern walls did not exist at the time of Jesus. And I pointed out to you, like this area, you can still see it, can't you? That was a walled area that was put in, heading this way, by Herod Agrippa. This was open space. That was the original wall here at the time of Jesus. So this area was obviously, outside of the confines of Jerusalem. Now, very good. So, let's look at something here. You will notice that, you will notice something. There's no agony in the garden, is there? When Jesus says, verse 4 at the end, whom are you looking for? They answered him, Jesus the Nazarene. He said to them, I am. I am. Now, your edition of the Bible may have that in all capital letters. Remember, the word I am in Hebrew is Yahweh. That's the name of God. Jesus responds with the name of God. Judas, his betrayer, was also with them. When he said to them, I am, they turned away and fell to the ground because he used the name of God. And then they fall to the ground. So this is obviously going to be a dramatic arrest, correct? Because now they fall to the ground. So again he asked them, whom are you looking for? They said, Jesus the Nazarene. He answered, I am. I told you that I am. So if you're looking for me, let these men go. This was to fulfill what he had said. I have not lost any of those who you gave me. That's coming from John chapter 6, correct? Now, this is something interesting. By avoiding the scene of agony, the Gospel of John is in reinforcing that this is the purpose of Jesus' mission. This is the purpose. Earlier, we heard Jesus say, I lay my life down, I take it up again. You know, the Gospel of John shows Jesus with a confidence and a conviction of the commitment to his purpose, which is going to lead to the cross. All the other Gospels talk about Simon Peter striking a slave of the high priest. But the Gospel of John gives us, and cutting off his ear, or cutting his ear. But the Gospel of John does something interesting. He gives us the name of the slave. The slave's name was Malchus. Now, the rest of it you've seen in other Gospels. Put your sword into the scabbard. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father gave me? In Gospel you will see Jesus will say, those that live by the sword die by the sword. But nevertheless, Jesus says, stop it. There will not be violence in trying to protect me. But you'll notice this. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father gave me? You don't see that before in this gospel, do you? But you do see it in the agony of the garden in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, correct? And so the Gospel of John, to put that statement there, is assuming that the people who read this gospel are already familiar with something like that. Otherwise, the sentence would come from out of the blue. What's the background to this? Now, the cup that Jesus refers to, I mentioned this before. Very often, when we think about when Jesus prays in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it is, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. You will notice that the others will say, the Father sent an angel to comfort him. But as I pointed out, the Gospel of John goes out of its way to show the confidence, the conviction, the commitment of Christ to the passion. It doesn't mean there's no agony, because it has to assume that people know the background of that one expression. And the cup, and remember I went through the marriage ceremony? You drank from the cup and you were married. Right. So if you just think the cup is the cup of suffering. Remember the Gospel of Luke? The Zebedee boys, their mom comes up and wants Jesus to say, when you come into your kingdom, can my sons be at your left or your right? And Jesus says, can you drink from the cup I'm going to drink from? And they say, yeah, okay. Well, but it's not just the suffering or passion. It's marriage. Covenant. Jesus being the covenant. It's made from his cross. Now, so the band of soldiers, the tribune, and the Jewish guards sees Jesus. Now, a tribune is a Roman officer. So we know of one Roman that's there for various reasons. They seized Jesus, bound him, and brought him to Annas first. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had counseled the Jews that it was better that one man should die rather than the whole people. Now we're going to come to something rather interesting here. It gets us to the question of who wrote the Gospel of John and the identity of the beloved disciple. Now, this has been a controversy for a number of centuries, and it's probably never going to be resolved. But we keep with this person who's a beloved disciple. He's never called an apostle. Remember, one of them will betray me. Which one is it? And Jesus said, one of the 12. That's assuming there's more than the 12 apostles at the Last Supper. I don't know how many more, but it's more than just what Leonardo da Vinci shows us, or typical, artwork. One of the 12. You wouldn't say that unless there was more than just the 12 there. And remember how I said the word apostle rarely appears? It doesn't appear. But the term the 12, that's a very important title. The 12. And at the end, you will see, we remember last Sunday's gospel, the beloved disciple is the one at the cross, not the apostles. They both scattered. Many times people put names to things because that makes it credible. So is it John the Apostle? And some people would say, well, how? Then, the son of Zebedee. And many would question, how can that be if this is around 96 AD when it comes out? Of course, it could have been written a decade earlier, but it gets, retooled, re-edited, But it keeps saying, the beloved disciple, I saw this. I'm the witness. And these things are true. I saw them. But he never has a name. But there's something else about this beloved disciple that is very peculiar. So let's look at verse 15. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Now the other disciple was known to the high priest, and he entered the courtyard of the high priest with Jesus. But Peter stood at the gate outside. So the other disciple, the acquaintance of the high priest, that's the second time it's mentioned, right? Went out and spoke to the gatekeeper and brought Peter in. And then that's when Peter goes into the courtyard where the scene of the denial of Peter 3 times takes place, correct? All four Gospels have the denial of Peter. But notice this. Who is this another disciple? He had to be there when Jesus was arrested. How would he know where he's being taken? Simon Peter knows. He saw him arrested. They run away. But notice, he is an acquaintance. He is known to the high priest. He's an acquaintance of the high priest of Caiaphas. I got news for you. That is no fisherman from Galilee. The high priest recognizes him. And no doubt he had to himself have been of a priestly family. And a rather noble one at that. To be an acquaintance of the high priest, to be known to the high priest. Caiaphas has no problem going in. If the others tried to get in, they've got guards. You're not getting past, you don't get even on the front porch, much less through the door. And the acquaintance, obviously, the gatekeeper recognizes him and says, let this guy in. Now, that's an interesting person, isn't it? But you'll notice it only says another disciple. Is that the beloved disciple who we see at the cross? These are questions that have yet to be completely resolved, at least as far as I know in terms of scholarship, and the debate about it is amazing. But I want you to look at the text and notice something. The Gospel of John gives us information that we don't see, and that's because of certain type of a knowledge and acquaintance. He knows the name of the slave of Caiaphas. You've got to have been in that house and met the guy before, correct, to know the name. Now, we are very familiar already with the trial of Jesus, etc. And so I don't want to go into that, because that is typical. Of course, we have here the cock crowed again. Peter denies it, and immediately the cock crowed. At the Church of St. Peter in Gallicantu, outside in the plaza, they have a bronze statue. It's a group of statues that show of the denial of Peter. And so it's amazing. Peter denies him, but this other disciple goes in to be with him. Now that's a fascinating reality, isn't it? This other disciple is not afraid to walk with Jesus. He's not afraid. He's not ashamed of him. The apostles are scared to death what's going to happen to them. But he accompanies Jesus. He's at his side. How can this be? Now we're going to go to the trial before Pilate. The trial before Pilate in the Gospel of John has significant differences. Now, in a minute, let's go to the blackboard. Before we go to some archaeology here, I want to, no, not yet. Get us back to, there we go. Now, here's the temple platform. Okay. Jutting inside here, just a little bit inside, the archaeology says, is the fortress of Antonia. It used to be here. Now, originally, a construction of the Maccabees, made much larger by Herod the Great. The fortress was called Antonia because it was named after Mark Antony. And Herod built it at the time that Mark Antony had charge of the Roman Empire in the eastern part, which he lost in his alliance, unfortunately, with Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. Now, so this is where the Roman garrison, and the Roman garrison, remember, at the time of Jesus, this is empty space, so the most vulnerable part of Jerusalem is in the north. That's why Agrippa later built other walls. And the Roman garrison could enter Jerusalem without having to go through the gates. They could go right into their fortress. And then from the fortress, they could actually go out onto the Temple Mount if there was a riot or something going on like that. And they were especially nervous during Passover. If there's going to be civil disturbance, this is going to be the time. Now, up here is what's known as the Praetorium. That's not where Pilate was. It's here. And there's almost nothing left of, as I said, there's almost nothing left of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. Now, here's what's going on. St. Francis of Assisi was actually the first one to begin the Stations of the Cross. 14 stations. And St. Francis himself started the Terra Sancta, Holy Land province. Remember, he had gone, to Egypt. Tried to evangelize the Caliph. Well, anyway. So when they decided, where's the church, the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre, what's left of it? No. So when they wanted to do the Stage of the Cross, they started because all of this at the time of Jesus is gone. But from the ruins of the fortress of Antonia is where to this day you go to Via Dolorosa and do the Stations of the Cross. And it's a fascinating journey, by the way. And then, Church of Holy Sepulchre here. Now, but at the time of Jesus, see, this is the walls. All right. That's the Praetorium. That was Herod's palace. When Pontius Pilate would come to Jerusalem during those big pilgrimage holidays, and also at other times during the year to reside there, because you needed the procurator when you've got, almost 1 million people coming in living around Jerusalem. And so, this is where we maintain the trial took place. Now, when you visit Jerusalem today, this is called the Citadel. Even at the time of Herod, it was a citadel. There are 3 great towers, and the ruins of those towers are still there, by the way. But because of the destructions that have happened, etc., you would never guess that there was ever a palace that was there. And the Hasmonean Palace is probably here in this area. That was where after the Maccabean revolt, that's where the king of Judea lived. Now we're going to go to the next slide. This is to give you an idea of where Jesus is at and the dynamic that's taking place. This is now the most recent attempt at the archaeology of Herod's palace. Much of this is underground. So digging through here, these vaults, trying to get, even the way the walls aren't the same as they were at the time of Jesus. And trying to locate some of these places. If you go to visit the Citadel, it was a fortress. It had a Jordanian army in it in 1966. Remember the 6-Day War? Well, you still got bullet holes and stuff like that because the Jordanian army was also located in this part called the Citadel. and it was refortified during the time of during the Ottoman Empire. So now, can we have the next one, please? It's called the Tower of David Museum. If you go on the internet, I've been there several times. It's called Tower of David Museum because one of the towers of Herod's palace, and there's still one to this day, it's called the Tower of David. Another one was named Hippicus, and another one named after Herod's brother. Now, here we go. Archaeological reconstruction of Herod's palace. Western Wall of Jerusalem. Look at this thing. It's like a double palace here. Pools, colonnade around it, gardens. But look over here. Look at this wall. Yeah, it's a palace, but I got news for you. This palace is sitting inside of a massive fortress, isn't it? That's so if there's a riot going on, Herod could be protected by his army because it's almost like this is a separate, isolated fortress right, on the western part of Jerusalem. You'll notice the structure over here. This area going this way was called the agora. The Greek word agora is the word for a marketplace. This is the shopping mall of Jerusalem. Big place, okay. And here you can see the colonnades of a theater. All right. Now can I have the next slide, please? All right, here's another version of this looking to the north. See what I'm talking about, those towers? The foundation of those towers are in Jerusalem to this day. Some people try to look at some of the bedrock that is here. This is where right now the wall of Jerusalem goes. It used to be further out this way because you can still see bedrock protrusions to this day. But you can see the magnificence of this place. And here we go, there are the walls. Then out there and through what's called the Ginnith Gate. Now, this particular model is showing Jerusalem at the time of the Jewish revolt, not at the time of Jesus. Now, this is where Pontius Pilate would come into town. And you notice Pilate could get into town without having to go into Jerusalem itself. So you can see, look at the fortification of this thing. All right, next slide, please. All right, here's an aerial view. I said this would be Jerusalem at the time, not of Jesus, but rather at the time of before the Jewish revolt, before 60 AD. And so here you get sort of a big view here of Jerusalem. Look at this. Those are the towers he mentioned that are here to this day. Those archaeological things I showed you are taking place under here. Here we go in through the agora. You'll notice an amphitheater was there at the time. The Last Supper took place up over here. We can barely make that part out. Okay. This was also a hippodrome here, chariot races going on. And there is the royal portico. There you have the Temple Mount right here. Okay. So the Jesus trial is taking place out here, where they had to bring him inside. You will notice it says that the Jews, the Judeans, remember when you hear the word the Jews, it means the Jewish leadership. See, how many people brought Jesus to Pilate? You're talking about the high priesthood, the members of the high priesthood on the Sanhedrin, likewise that group of Pharisees, but mostly the priests. And now, can I have the next slide? Now, the reason why I'm showing here, this is recent discovery. This was the theater at Caesarea Maritima. Remember, this was the largest seaport in the Roman world. It was built by Herod the Great. They had the technology to make concrete piers, to make a harbor. They had cement that would solidify underwater. Herod had them make caissons out of wood, sink it down, start from the shore, from the rocky shore, and as you pumped the concrete into it, the water level, of course, gets displaced, correct? In fact, they've even found the platforms down in the underwater archaeology is a recent science of how this thing was constructed. It's just fascinating. Well, Herod built a palace. And this is where Pontius Pilate would stay, or the other procurators, because they governed Judea from here. This was what you might call the cap. This was from where the Romans governed. This was the central office. And Herod built a palace on this jetty coming out, and finding the ruins of this, you can now see the ruins of it and the foundations, but this is recent discovery, maybe past 30 years. And especially this amazing rotunda, same type of thing you'll see at Masada. You have an entrance, a reflecting pool. This is sort of the public area, then the private area. And Herod always kept a boat docked here, fully loaded, so just in case there was another revolution, he could escape. Herod always had escape plans. Now, the other one I show is another model of this area. It's a bit plainer, correct? But that you can still see this today. You go from the theater, you can walk over here, and you can actually see the remains of what was a reflecting pool that was there in a courtyard. But notice this. This is a huge hippodrome, chariot races. Remember the movie Ben-Hur? The famous chariot race? It took place in Caesarea. This is where it was. Pontius Pilate, it governs from here, correct? And so, real simple. You just walk on over, take your box. And here is something amazing. This is recent discovery. 20 years. Here's what happened. It's been missing since the 6th century later. What happened? Much of what was left of Caesarea Maritima by the 7th century was completely wiped out. Now the Crusaders were able to use the harbor, what was left of it. After time you're going to get deterioration, correct? And they built a fortified area, around it. But Caesarea was minimally occupied at the time. What happened was tsunami, an earthquake, and a tsunami had covered the area, and this whole thing was under the sand. It was covered, it was under the sand. In fact, it's so deep that for archaeological reasons, there's a black basalt building. But they decided to leave that building alone because it's almost 1,000 years old. And so when you see the ruins in fact, they've even got the frescoes. There were frescoes that show gladiators or charioteers, animals. They've got them under plexiglass now to protect them from the elements. But you can see the decorations, the paintings that were along the walls, of the chariot race. But right about here, Well, when they were excavating, well, we can't remember those steps I showed you at the Pool of Siloam. You got a neighborhood above you. Well, they didn't want to take that out because it's archaeological interest. So when you see it, you're going to look at this building that's on a mesa, right in the middle of it. And it gives you an idea of how deeply, highly covered that this area was, but that's by the sand and silt from the tsunami. Oh, and by the way, at the theater here nearby, now they have since replaced this with a copy. The original is now in the museum to protect from the elements. But archaeological evidence of Pontius Pilate. There's a plaque dedicating that theater. And it has, you can see part of the word in Latin, Pontio Pilatus. You can see part of ad Tiberius, who was emperor at the time that Jesus was crucified. So, it's archaeological evidence of the existence of Pontius Pilate. You would be surprised how many people want to say there is no evidence for Pontius. Why do you think the Creed goes out of its way to mention Pontius Pilate? Isn't that amazing? The Creed goes out of its way to mention Pontius Pilate. So, can we get us back to the Herod's palace in Jerusalem again, please? Yes, leave that one there. Whoops, no, the other one. The big one, Jerusalem, yeah. Let's leave that one there. Okay. Now, let's look at Jesus before Pilate. And then they brought Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. Remember, the Latin word praetorium comes from the military. The praetorium was where the general lived, and it was also a religious site also. So that's the commanding post. So there it is. It was morning, and they themselves did not enter the praetorium in order not to be defiled so they could eat the Passover. You cannot go into the home of a Gentile. Okay? There's the walls. They come around. We don't know which one it was, which one of these two. And so Pilate has to go out to them. Now, here is something fascinating. That people, unless you know history, you're going to miss a powerful reality. Even if they didn't bring Jesus to Pilate, the priests would have to come to Pilate anyway. Why? Because Augustus Caesar, remember the emperor of Rome, we use the word emperor, but I mentioned there's no way to describe this kind of a government. The Romans hated the word king. We use the word emperor, but in Latin, imperator is the word for the commander-in-chief of an army. But this person was commander-in-chief of an army, dictator for life, consul for life. What type of a name did he give to this? And so they gave the name for this type of high, chief executive, the name of a man. Caesar. What do you call this? Caesar. Julius may have died in 47 BC, but you called him the Caesar. In German, it's pronounced Kaiser. And in Slavonic, it's pronounced Tsar. Okay. Well, one of the titles that Caesar had for life, like Augustus Caesar, was High Priest Pontifex Maximus of Roman religion. the Roman emperor considered himself to be the high priest. See, every year the Senate would elect one of their senators to be high priest that year. But the emperor got the title for life. Right. He had a religious function. But he considered himself to be the high priest of all the religions in the empire. Augustus and Tiberius, likewise, would make a donation to the temple in Jerusalem to have sacrifices offered for their well-being and for the empire. And as a result, if Tiberius seizes the high priest of all the religions in the empire, Caiaphas has vestments. You know, it goes back to the book of Exodus, the vestments of the high priest, that the high priest would wear, you know, like to go inside the temple, Passover, Feast of Tabernacles, Pentecost, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. The high priest, Caiaphas, the high priests, could not keep the vestments because the emperor of Rome considered himself to be the high priest of all religions in the empire. The vestments of the high priest were in the custody of Pontius Pilate. Interesting contrast. They hand over the high priest of the new covenant, but at the same time have to get the vestments of the high priest from them. If you look at history, Herod Agrippa grew up with the Emperor Claudius. When he became king of Judea and the Galilee too with it, because of their friendship, there exists what is known as the rescript of Claudius. Claudius let the high priests have the vestments back. They did not have to go to the procurator to get them. Fascinating, isn't it? Okay. So Pilate came out and said to them, "What charge you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." At this Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your own law." The Judeans answered him, "We don't have the right to execute anyone," in order that the word of Jesus might be fulfilled, that he said, indicating the kind of death he would die. So Pilate went back into the praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him, now notice, Pilate goes back inside and then he summons Jesus. So Jesus goes inside. I've always wondered who was in that group that remembered all this. So he has Jesus brought into him. He's separate from the others. Are you the king of the Jews? Now I'm interested, you would notice, did the high priest say this guy claims to be king of the Jews yet? No, so one of two things is happening here. It's assuming that that's what the Sanhedrin that brought him in had told Pilate. Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or have others told you about me?" So there it is. Others have said something. Pilate answered, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your nation, the chief priests, handed you over to me." Notice Pilate focuses on the chief priests here. They handed me over. "What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom did belong to this world, my attendants would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. Here, of course, again, we hear the word Jews, the Judeans, the Judean authorities. But that as it is, my kingdom is not here. So Pilate said to him, then you are a king? Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. And Pilate said to him, what is truth? When he had said this, he again went out to the Judeans. Now notice, it appears that this conversation with Pilate, this is inside. He's away from everybody else. This is a separate interview. But somebody else had to be there to hear it. Of course, his own attendants, etc. So he goes out again. I find nothing wrong with this man. But you have a custom that I release one prisoner to at Passover. Do you want me to release you the king of the Jews? They cry out again, not this one, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a revolutionary. Now, when we have motion pictures of this scene, it looks like it takes place in, in a crowd of about 100,000, correct? But right now, the first time they hear Barabbas, you think Pontius Pilate is going to let a mob inside those gates? And this is part of the agora. It's not over there. It's there. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged. And so we know the rest of the story about this part of the Passion, correct? Once more, Pilate went out. Now, where the scourging took place is anyone's guess, because him with his army, Pilate has to have a barracks. Notice this wall over here, my word. I mean, talk about a citadel. Look at this. Got a wall here, you got this, then you got these guard towers. Look at the three of these things. It's an impregnable fortress. Here's one over here, yeah. So then Pilate brings him out. And if you want to know what a Roman scourging looked like, just look at Mel Gibson's, The Passion of Christ. I mean, it's probably the most accurate one. In Flavius Josephus, I do have a passage I marked where Flavius Josephus describes a Roman flogging for another person whose name happened to be Yeshua, by the way, who was a priest. He was a Levite. And he was talking about the temples that were going to be destroyed, the Temple Mount. I mean, this was just before the famous Jewish rebellion. And Flavius Josephus said he didn't die from the scourging, but it said that you could see the white of his bones from the flesh that was torn away. Some of the rib bones you could see. When the chief priests and the guards called him, now notice it says the chief priests and the guards saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no fault in him." Well, it's the chief priests and the guards. Now, I will grant it. If you look at other Gospels, one of them will say Pilate was afraid of a riot starting. But here, this is a more intimate scene, isn't it? That's what I say the Gospel of John gives us something different here. The Jews answered and said, "We have a law. According to that law, he ought to die. Because he made him crucify him, I find no guilt in him. he made himself the Son of God. Now when Pilate heard this statement, he became even more afraid. He went into the praetorium and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" Jesus did not answer him. So Pilate said to him, "You not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and have the power to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me had it not been given to you from above. For this reason, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." Consequently, Pilate tried to release Jesus. But the Jews cried out, "If you release him, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." Now, several things here. Where do you come from? Remember, throughout this gospel, that's always been the question. Where do you come from? The question is also for the Christians, where do we come from? In the Gospel of John, the answer to that question, where do we come from, is that we come from the cross of Christ. We're going to see that when we see the crucifixion. That's the reason why we make the sign of the cross when we pray. That is our identity. That's where we come from. We are born from the cross. We'll see that in the crucifixion scene. And the other part is that now, Pilate wants to release him. But then it starts to happen. He brought Jesus out and seated him on the judge's bench in the place called the stone pavement, in Hebrew, Gabbatha. One of these places here, stone pavement. It was preparation day for Passover, and it was about noon. And he said to them, "Behold your king." They cried out, take him away, crucify him." Pilate said to him, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. We have no king but Caesar. It's a powerful indictment about them. Because God, Yahweh, is the King of Israel. That was the big controversy about the selection of Saul as king, the first one. Samuel is depressed. He says, "Don't worry, it's not you that they reject, it's me." Because the idea was that God himself, the Lord, is the king. The king, or an earthly ruler, is an instrument, a vicar for the true king of Israel. To cry out, "We have no king but Caesar," is themselves a betrayal of their own faith. Now, at that particular point, it's now an hour. So tomorrow, the next week, we're going to pick up on the crucifixion of Jesus. And I would point out that we'll begin with the overview map, because we'll show you this area where Jesus where the crucifixion takes place. Thank you all very much.